Top Trump officials are headed to Saudi Arabia soon to start Russia-Ukraine peace talks. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says Ukraine wasn't invited to those talks. The U.S. also says Europe won't be part of the negotiations.
Really, we want peace very much, but we need real security guarantees.
This comes after Zelensky met with U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance at the Munich Security Conference on Friday. Zelensky told Vance he wants security guarantees before peace talks begin. William Taylor served as the U.S. ambassador to Ukraine from 2006 to 2009. He was also the chargé d'affaires at the U.S. Embassy in Kyiv in 2019. I spoke to him on Friday about the significance of Trump's plan for peace talks and how hopeful he is that the war could, in fact, come to an end. Ambassador Taylor, thank you so much for joining us.
Rosemary, it's a pleasure to be here.
So President Trump says he is beginning immediate negotiations with President Putin to end the war in Ukraine. They did speak on the phone on Wednesday. We don't know when these negotiations are going to happen. But in your mind, how big a deal is this? How significant is it?
This is a big deal, Rosemary. I think we all agree this is a big deal. This is a change. The previous administration in the United States was able to put together a big coalition, including Canada and the rest of Europe, to support Ukraine. But there was never an urgency from the outside to try to bring it to an end. This has changed. The new administration is changing that. It's now put at the top of its agenda, or near the top of its agenda, the effort to stop this war. And that could be a good thing.
On Thursday, the president said that Ukraine would be involved in those peace talks. Canada's prime minister said this week, too, that this has to be something that the Ukraine sort of leads in terms of the negotiations. How confident are you that Ukraine will be involved? What role would you like to see them have in these?
I am confident. I believe President Trump when he says the Ukrainians will be in these negotiations. They have to be. I mean, the Canadian Prime Minister is exactly right. The Canadian Prime Minister is exactly right. The Ukrainian President is exactly right. That is, if there is an agreement without the Ukrainians' agreement, that without the Ukrainians' input into that agreement, then Ukraine will not implement.
Yeah.
The Ukrainian people need to see that this is in their interest. They have a lot at stake. So sure, the Ukrainians have to be involved, and in order to make it work, to be successful, to be lasting, to be just, the Ukrainians have to be there.
It does seem, though, Ambassador, as though the Trump administration is not necessarily setting this up in the best way for leverage in terms of the negotiations, because the Defense Secretary, Pete Hegseth, said that NATO membership for Ukraine and a return to pre-2014 borders is unrealistic. NATO membership for Ukraine is really important, as you know. So what do you make of putting those things on the table before the negotiations even begin?
Well, I think even Secretary Hegseth clarified, clarified the next day that any of the conditions, any of the outcomes, any of the parameters of this negotiation would be decided in the negotiation. He said that President Trump would be able to see what's on the table and what's off the table, and until then, all's on the table. And I think the Vice President Vance, has made that clear as well in his comments, that there are a lot of things, I think he even said there are a lot of things that they don't like, that the new administration may not like, that if in order to get the Russians to the table, the Americans and the Ukrainians have to put back on the table. This might include NATO membership, for example. That might be in order. The other thing that I think even Secretary Hegseth said was that in the negotiations, NATO membership would not play a role, and I think that is right. That is, we don't want, NATO doesn't want, the United States doesn't want, Ukraine doesn't want Russians involved in that decision. The decision on when and how the Ukrainians join NATO, that's a decision for Ukraine and NATO.
Sure.
Putin has nothing to say about that. So I think,
but we know, Ambassador. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we know, Ambassador, that Putin doesn't want Ukraine to be part of NATO. So, I think it's fairly predictable that he would put that on the negotiating table, would he not?
He might, but we say no. We say no. We don't care. I don't think we care what Putin thinks about NATO and Ukraine's membership. That's not an issue for them, and it is only a decision for NATO and Ukraine. So I'm not so interested in what Putin wants about NATO.
Okay, you mentioned the Vice President Vance there. He did give an interview to the Wall Street Journal, and he said the U.S. would hit Moscow with sanctions and potentially military action if Putin won't agree to a peace deal. What do you make of that change as well? Because that, to me, is a whole new level of potential problem.
A problem, that's part of the solution, Rosemary. That's part of the solution. If what we are going to do, if what the United States and the rest of NATO are going to do is put pressure on Putin to first come to the table.
Sure.
We're not sure that he's going to even be there in any real serious sense, but we need to pressure him, and then second, to implement whatever they conclude, whatever the agreement is. That may well take more sanctions. Which the Vice President talked about, may well take military support. It will clearly take military support to the Ukrainians. And the Vice President went further and said it might take U.S. military support that in order to make Putin adhere to the agreement.
We are approaching the 3-year anniversary of that invasion, and I wonder how important you think, or how hopeful you are that the war needs to end, because it has gone on so much longer than I think anyone would have expected.
It's gone on longer than anyone expected, because everyone expected at the beginning, Rosemary, we all remember, we thought this was going to end in 3 days and the Russians were going to roll over the Ukrainians. Well, obviously that didn't happen. The Ukrainians have put up a fight for nearly 3 years, for 3 years come in a week, 3 full years, and they've stopped one of the largest militaries in the world and have held it to a stalemate. It's really a stalemate. There's no doubt about it. Now, most of that is due to the bravery and the competence of the Ukrainians, but a lot of it is also support from us. That needs to continue. Yes, and I hope this anniversary is the last one. That is, I hope it's over within the next year, and it could be a just and lasting peace. Is what I think President Trump is looking for. I know that's what the Ukrainians are looking for, and if we can force that on President Putin, a just and lasting peace with Ukraine as a sovereign, independent, Western European nation, that's success.
Okay. Former U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine, William Taylor, thank you so much for your time today, sir.
Thank you, Rosemary.